right, so get ready, because today we're diving into some seriously fascinating stuff. You guys wanted to explore Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpara speech. And let me tell you, this is not your typical political address. Imagine this. It's 1909, India is fighting for independence, and Aurobindo's just been released from Alipore jail. He steps up to address the nation, but this speech, it's infused with these profound spiritual insights that he experienced during his imprisonment.
It's pretty remarkable, right? Like before this, Aurobindo was known for his intellect, his calls for revolutionary action, not necessarily known as a spiritual figure, but that time in jail, especially that year in solitary confinement, it really sparked something deep within him. It's like his vision for India's future became totally inseparable from his own inner transformation.
Yeah, it's electric, the atmosphere he describes. This huge crowd in Uttarpara, key figures missing, and you can practically feel the tension as he starts speaking. Even Aurobindo addresses it directly, talking about how the energy has shifted since he was in prison.
Oh, absolutely. And that context is crucial here. You've got the Swadeshi movement, which Aurobindo was super involved in, and it had faced some serious suppression. I mean, many of his comrades were imprisoned, deported, some were forced into hiding. So this wasn't just like a political setback for them. It really left people questioning things, wondering what the path to freedom even looked like at that point.
And then in the middle of all of this, Aurobindo talks about this hush, descending a time for the nation to kind of turn inward. And it wasn't about giving up the fight for independence or anything, but more like a strategic retreat, a time for some deep reflection before that next phase.
It's interesting, too, because this is where his personal journey becomes so central to the speech. He talks about how that year in solitary confinement became this period of really intense spiritual learning. And it actually kind of mirrored what his fellow freedom fighter Bipin Chandra Pal also experienced in jail. It's like in that silence and that stripping away of everything external, they both encountered this deeper well of strength.
So we've got this political turmoil, we've got this spiritual awakening, and then he hits us with this line, I realized what the Hindu religion meant. And I have to admit, this is where I think a lot of us who maybe weren't raised Hindu might initially stumble a little bit.
Yeah.
We tend to think about religion as this set of beliefs.
Right.
But Aurobindo's talking about Sanatan Dharma, which is something much, much bigger.
It is. It's so much bigger. It's not just about faith. It's about this whole way of life, a path of action and being that's been this guiding force for millennia. Imagine like a universal truth, an eternal law that governs the cosmos, our lives, everything. That's kind of the essence of Sanatana Dharma. Aurobindo really believed that this wasn't just some abstract concept. It actually held the key to India's liberation, both politically and spiritually.
And to illustrate this idea, he describes these really vivid experiences that he had within the prison walls. I mean, we're talking trees transforming into Krishna, fellow prisoners embodying the divine. It's almost like he's describing a psychedelic trip, but within Alipore jail.
It does sound kind of fantastical when you describe it like that, but it actually speaks to this really core concept in Hindu philosophy called Vasudeva. Think of it like this. Have you ever looked at something totally ordinary, a flower, a sunset, even the face of a stranger, and felt this like surge of awe, this connection to something so much bigger than yourself? Well, that's a glimpse of Vasudeva. It's that divine essence that's woven into all of existence. Aurobindo wasn't hallucinating. He was experiencing this truth, directly seeing the divine in the most unexpected of places.
So it wasn't escape, it was complete shift in perception. And this newfound clarity fueled his actions, because he talks about how he felt like his defense during the trial was being orchestrated by a higher power, that even his lawyer was divinely guided.
Yeah, that ties into this whole concept of nishkama karma. It essentially means acting without being attached to the results. Imagine pouring your heart into something not for personal gain or recognition, but because it's simply the right thing to do. That's nishkama karma. Aurobindo wasn't being passive. He was surrendering his ego, trusting that by aligning himself with this greater force, things would unfold as they should.
So we've got this political unrest, we've got these spiritual experiences, but then it gets even more interesting because then he turns his attention to the people.
He does, and particularly to the youth. He sees this potential in the young generation, this like new wave of energy that could really carry India forward. He even tells them, this is the young generation, the new and mighty nation that is arising at my command. What if you stood aside or slept? The work would still be done. You have only got some strength from me to speak a word to this nation which will help to raise it. It's like he's entrusting them with something way bigger than himself, something powerful enough to really shape the destiny of a nation.
Yeah, it's like he's placing his faith in this new generation, right? And their ability to tap into that essence of the Sanatana Dharma. and use that to not only liberate India, but like uplift the entire world. It's a powerful message of hope, especially during a time of such uncertainty and turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
But how did he envision them accomplishing that? Like, what was the game plan?
Well, and that's what makes the Uttarpara speech so interesting. He doesn't really offer up a concrete political strategy. There's no step-by-step guide to independence or anything. It's much deeper than that. Instead, he focuses on something much deeper, the spiritual revolution. He even says this movement is not a political movement and that nationalism is not politics, but a religion, a creed of faith.
He's blurring the lines here, don't you think?
Yeah.
Showing everyone that true liberation goes way beyond just political structures.
Yeah, he's totally talking about a spiritual awakening here, one that he believed could fuel their fight for independence and ultimately transform the world. It's almost like he's saying that until they transform themselves, true freedom will always remain kind of out of reach. It's about recognizing that the fight for freedom is deeply intertwined with their own inner evolution, their own personal connection to that universal truth that he found in that Sanatan Dharma.
He even says at one point, this is the Sanatana, this is the eternal religion. It is this that I have perfected and developed through the rishis, saints, and avatars, and now it is going forth to do my work among the nations. I mean, talk about a bold claim.
Yeah.
He's essentially saying that this ancient tradition holds the key to solving the world's problems. But I thought he saw this eternal religion as being about more than just Hinduism.
Right, and that's a point that I think is often misunderstood. You see, he wasn't necessarily advocating for some type of Hindu theocracy, and he definitely wasn't trying to impose one single belief system on everyone. Instead, he really believed that the Sanatana Dharma, at its core, transcended any one religion or culture. It's not about conversion or domination or anything like that. It's about recognizing that underlying unity that connects us all.
So while he acknowledges the profound significance of Hinduism and its unique role in preserving these truths, he also really emphasizes the universal nature of these principles, suggesting that they really do transcend all those cultural and religious boundaries.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he's saying that these different religions are all just like trying to express the same fundamental truths, but through different lenses and different languages.
Precisely. And honestly, that's what makes Aurobindo's perspective so relevant even today. Like, in a world that's grappling with all these religious and political divides, right? His message of unity and interconnectedness feels incredibly timely. Like, he's challenging us to look beyond all those superficial differences and tap into that shared humanity that binds us all.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we hear these terms like eternal religion, it's easy for it to come across as very exclusive, even a bit preachy at times. But Aurobindo kind of flips the script. He's saying that a truly eternal religion, by its very nature, has to be all-encompassing. It has to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, not just one slice of it.
Exactly. Because if it's not universal, then how can it possibly be eternal? A religion that's confined to a particular time or place, or even just like a group of people, will inevitably just fade away. But the truths that Aurobindo is talking about, the interconnectedness of all things that divine spark within each of us, the inherent unity of existence, those are timeless and boundless.
And he speaks about Sanatana Dharma not as just this set of beliefs, but as a really profound experience that touches every aspect of like our being. He says it's something we realize in the mind, in the heart, in the body. He even goes on to describe his own journey of doubt and skepticism before he embraced the truths that he encountered.
And that's what makes his transformation so compelling. Like, he didn't just blindly accept these teachings. No, he approached them with his critical mind. He wrestled with doubt, questioned everything. He even talks about how initially the agnostic was in me, the atheist was in me, the skeptic was in me. But it was actually through this process of questioning, of testing these truths for himself, that he came to experience their power directly.
Yeah, he even shared this very powerful prayer where he said, "If thou art, then thou knowest my heart. Thou knowest that I do not ask for mukti. I do not ask for anything which others ask for. I ask only for strength to uplift this nation, to be allowed to live and work for this people whom I love." And it's incredible to think that this wasn't about him seeking any kind of personal liberation or escaping from the suffering all around him. He was driven by this really deep love for his people, a desire to see them free, to help them fulfill their potential.
Yeah.
And for him, that was inherently intertwined with that Sanatana Dharma, with its message of truth, unity, and the potential for human evolution.
That's the heart of it, isn't it? He really saw India's destiny as being deeply intertwined with the Sanatana Dharma, but not in a way that excluded others or sought to impose like a single belief system. He believed that by embodying the principles of the Sanatana Dharma, India could become this kind of beacon of light for the world. this source of wisdom and inspiration for all people seeking a more just and compassionate world.
It's like he's saying that the path to true liberation, both individually and collectively, lies in aligning ourselves with this eternal order, with this universal consciousness that he calls Vasudeva. But man, that's a pretty big concept. How do we even begin to wrap our heads around that, let alone apply it to our own lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, I think Aurobindo would probably say there's no, one-size-fits-all answer. It's more about recognizing that spark of the divine within each of us and then allowing that to guide our actions out in the world. It's about living a life that's aligned with those universal truths of, unity and compassion and selfless action.
So instead of giving us this set of rules, it's like he's offering us a framework, a new way of seeing the world and our place in it. It's less about adhering to dogma and more about just tapping into that deeper well of wisdom that we're all connected to.
Exactly. And this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea to him either. He really believed this had some serious real-world implications. He saw this whole inner transformation as being super deeply intertwined with India's struggle for independence. He even said this movement is not a political movement and that nationalism is not politics, but a religion, a creed of faith.
He's really blurring those lines there. It's almost like he's saying that true liberation requires both. An outer revolution that breaks people free from oppressive structures, and then an inner revolution that awakens us to our interconnectedness, our shared humanity.
Yes, exactly. He believed that until they transformed themselves, true freedom would always remain just out of reach. They could achieve political independence, sure, but if they didn't have that inner shift, if they weren't aligning themselves with those universal truths, it wouldn't be a complete victory.
It's like he envisioned India as this spiritual beacon. You know? This source of light and wisdom for the whole entire world. And not through domination or conversion or anything like that, but by embodying those principles of unity, compassion, and selfless action. It's a pretty powerful vision, if you ask me, whether or not you agree with all of his conclusions.
It really is. And honestly, I think that's what makes the Uttarpara speech so compelling even now. It's a call to action, but not in that way we typically think about it. It's not about joining a political party or even necessarily fighting for a specific cause. It's bigger than that. It's about aligning ourselves with that eternal order, that universal truth that Aurobindo believed could really transform the entire world.
Yeah, and that is probably the most powerful takeaway from all of this. It's a huge reminder that real change, it always starts within each of us. It's about cultivating that connection to something way bigger than ourselves, tapping into that wellspring of wisdom and compassion that's already there inside, and allowing it to guide us, to guide our actions in the world.
It's about recognizing that we're not just these isolated individuals. We're threads in this huge tapestry of existence. And that our actions, no matter how small they seem, can create these ripples that extend far beyond just ourselves.
So there you have it, folks. Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpara speech. This powerful blend of political activism and profound spiritual insight. A call to action that I think resonates just as deeply today as it did over a century ago.
Absolutely. A reminder that the fight for a more just and compassionate world, it really does begin with each of us. It starts with our own willingness to look inward, to connect with that deeper truth, and then to let it guide us as we navigate the complexities of our time.
Perfectly said. And on that note, if this deep dive has kind of sparked your own curiosity about exploring that inner landscape, those universal truths that connect us all, well, that's exactly what we hoped for. Keep those questions coming, and until next time, happy exploring.